about it. I want the camera to show, and then we're not socially distanced. That's what I'm, social distance. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? The camera comes and then we're not socially distanced.
Move it on into the sunset.
No one could be in the Sure. All right, so we got so many different books.
We need the wipes.
Hey, Darling, I'm gonna come down and make my presentation. Wait,
How are you doing,
okay.
Councilwoman Miller?
Richard?
Yeah, you did a great job.
Right. Feel good?
Can you all get them? I put them.
All right, got it? That's number 18. I got you. Come on.
Vibrate.
It is now 5 minutes past 4. I'd like to call the committee of a whole to order. And at this time, turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and City Council and those who are viewing via the websites. Today, we're going to be involved in several important issues before the city. First of all will be a presentation of the Housing Strategic Plan recommendations that came out of the City Council retreat. Then we will hear a presentation on stop loss from the Mark III group. Then followed by that will be an update for our utilities, the delinquencies assistance program. Followed would be an update on the Sunset Avenue corridor study. Then we'll hear about the monthly crime statistics, and then we'll close with the discussion on the reopening of the city's facilities. So at this time, I will begin with the presentation of the Housing Strategic Plan recommendations, and we have a team of people here who will join me in the presentation. During your recent City Council retreat, it was our privilege as staff to present to you the draft Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. Following our presentation, you asked for more information on how we plan to implement its recommendations. Today, I am joined by my staff who reviewed the recommendations and identified initial steps that can be taken to implement them and move forward with Council's priority of expanding and preserving our city's supply of affordable, safe, and efficient housing. Our policy analyst and Affordable Housing Strategic Plan author, Jason Dawkins, prepared a memo you now have with an overview of staff's plans to take action on the proposed recommendations. Staff also identified 3 additional recommendations we will review with you that further our efforts to expand resident accessibility to affordable housing. All of these recommendations have been divided into 2 groups. The first group, which will be featured on slides 3 through 9, are recommendations focused on providing funding for new housing opportunities. The second group, which will present slides 10 through 18, are recommendations involving the establishment of targeted incentives through initiatives, policy changes, and additional funding, and that too, all to encourage affordable housing development. I will now turn it over to Jason to present the first 3 recommendations. And before he comes up, I would also like to remind the council that one of the recommendations or requests of council at the retreat was that we go back and take a look at the previous housing studies that were done. And last week you received copies from my house, from my office, kind of feels like my house sometimes, regarding the studies that were done previously. The first, of course, was in 2007, and then the most recent housing study that was done in 2014. And so we'll be speaking a little bit later about the recommendations that came out of those two housing studies. Jason?
Thank you, Madam Manager, and to the Mayor and members of Council. It's a pleasure to be back before you. I'll be discussing the first 4 recommendations outlined in the Housing Strategic Plan and some estimated cost updates. The first recommendation is the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund allows for the creation of a Housing Trust Fund allows for the city to fund the production and preservation of affordable housing through acquisition, construction, and rehabilitation. There are 4 considerations that need to be considered when considering a housing trust fund: the amount of estimated revenue that is needed. Both Charlotte and Asheville finance theirs through bonds. The targeted beneficiaries of the fund, you're looking at about 80%. Both cities use 80% of their area median income. The capacity, you're looking at the application process, how it was structured, and then the loan amount that might be given, and then who conducts the oversight. Both cities used their version of community and business development. The startup costs are about $101,000 over year 1, and then you're looking at about $417,000 over a 3-year period. That includes pay and benefits, office and administrative costs, and then program development. The second recommendation is the acquisition fund. Just for some review, an acquisition fund is like a pot of financial capital created by a city to acquire public and private areas for future housing, affordable housing development. Usually the developers are mission-driven or nonprofits, and that way they can act quickly as opposed to having to wait around for some traditional funding. Developers, an acquisition fund can work in 2 specific ways. One, the acquisition fund purchases the funding for the developer, and then the developer, you have, when they get the money back, you have a transfer, and then, or the other ways that they use the financial capital, and they use the financial capital from the fund, and then they reimburse. In both cases, you get a recycling of the funding, and then you can recycle it for new projects. Staff estimates that it will cost about $116,000 in year 1, and then $503 over the 3-year period. The third is the Preservation Fund. It's a tool designed to preserve the quality, accessibility, and affordability of existing income-restricted and naturally occurring affordable rentable housing by providing financial capital for site development or rehabilitation. It's somewhat like what the city's already doing with the housing repair program. The staff estimates the cost will be the same, $116,000 over the first year, and then $503,000 over the 3-year period. All three could be seen as independent organizations or an additional responsibility to a community nonprofit or a city department like CBD. The final would be the Community Land Trust. It's a nonprofit, independent organization that can develop or redevelop residential properties with the mission to provide affordable housing by retaining ownership of the land and then leasing it, typically through a long-term ground lease that's typically about 99 years. And then when the owner got tired of, or the owner would decide to move out, you would sell it back to the Community Land Trust. Staff estimates that startup costs will be about $261,000 over year one, and then about $1 million over a 3-year period. What you're looking at is the hiring of an executive director, property acquisition, and the rehabilitation. Funding would originate from the American Rescue Plan, the seed funding. Then the city will provide about 50% support for operations costs, and then 50% would come from community donations. I will now pass the ball to Amy Staten, who will discuss the other recommendations.
Recommendation number 5 is passing a general obligation bond focused on affordable housing. Efforts toward a bond offering could occur in 3 phases. Phase 1 would entail analysis of existing and future debt capacity and affordability with a placeholder for a future bond offering. We will work with the city's financial advisor to build a comprehensive financial model incorporating the city's existing debt and future debt, which would be approved through the city's capital improvement plan. This portion of the analysis will provide information for the capacity for new debt. The analysis will also forecast revenue that could be dedicated to payment of the debt, and that portion provides information regarding affordability of the debt. The final step is layering in options with bond offerings while considering the best timing for capacity and affordability. The recommended financial model will be compliant with the debt management policy. The next phase involves a discussion of the financial model with City Council. Options will be provided for bond financing for various amounts with the corresponding financial impact for each of those. And the model can be revised and refined based on your feedback. Once City Council approves to move forward with the bond financing, the amount of the financing and the projects to include, staff will proceed with the bond financing process. The process requires approximately 7 months prior to the election that will include the bond referendum. The process will also include all statutory requirements, meetings with the LGC or local government commission, continued due diligence, and public engagement. The final phase is after the bond referendum passes. The city has 7 years from the passing of the bond order to issue the bonds. And during this final phase is when the project plans will be refined. Costs for the bond process, for legal, the financial advisor, underwriters, visiting the rating agencies is estimated to be about $525,000. There should be a component for public engagement that's estimated to be $75,000. And there will be some capital project design that will be needed in this preliminary phase, in phase 1 and 2, that could be up to 5% of the project cost. Next is recommendation 5, and Peter Varney will cover that.
This recommendation has to do with increasing the construction of multifamily housing near major transit stations. So we only have one major transit station, and that is the bus station located on the south side of the train station. And so there are some opportunities on the east side of the railroad tracks, mainly along the Arlington Street corridor. There are several blocks there that are mainly residentially developed, but there is some commercial, light commercial development in there. And those blocks have a number of vacant lots in them and lots with deteriorated and dilapidated housing on them and vacant commercial establishments. And so the city's role there could be to assemble land, assemble the parcels, to assemble tracts of land that could be used to leverage investment by private investors in multifamily housing. A downside of that option is if you had a lot of pedestrian traffic that came from these multifamily developments, that pedestrian traffic should be directed to the Marigold Street corridor so that people could cross safely at the Marigold Railroad crossing there. On the west side of the bus station, the opportunities are mainly with commercial properties. There on both sides of Andrews Street, there are commercial establishments that could be redeveloped into multifamily housing. I would envision an incentive we might consider it would be to, say, engage architectural services to design or lay out housing in these buildings, and then use that maybe as leverage to encourage investment. That's on both sides of Andrews Street. On the west side of Franklin Street there at the railroad crossing, there's another commercial property that could be redeveloped, possibly redeveloped as multifamily. And going further west, even between, let's say, Pearl Nance and Grace, there's a piece of property that I believe is vacant, and I think the city still owns that property that could be redeveloped. So those are some options. Some advantages to developing multifamily in the area of the bus station are that the senior center is located close by, right adjacent actually to the bus station. And in addition to that, any redevelopment that we could do could encourage would support our downtown revitalization efforts. I'm going to turn that over to let's see, is it Will next? Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon. The recommendation number 7 is to revise density bonus policy. And what we're looking at right now is coming together with a recommendation of a scaled density bonus policy for affordability based on the existing zoning classification and existing density. So when you look at that, it'll be, what are you designating as affordable gets you X amount increase, and we'll bring that to you in the next month or so. And that policy will be crafted utilizing existing policies that we've seen and we've studied throughout the state and take advantage of some of those best practices that we've seen. Okay, next is eliminate the eligibility requirement to build, occupy an accessory dwelling unit. Again, this was repealed as an amendment in late 2020 to allow additional unit on single-family lot for detached homes. And we're going to work with communications to explore ways to promote this policy change through our website redesign and education and possibly City TV 19 interviews in the future. And we'll invite Amy Staten back up.
Recommendation number 9 is the implementation of a tax or lien foreclosure that as a measure to deal with large number of dilapidated, deteriorated, and vacant homes. The city has statutory authority and an existing administrative policy that allows for the foreclosure on of property where the city has a lien due to unpaid taxes, assessments, or loans. The initial step involves gathering data on the areas identified in the housing study and through community code. The data gathered will be provided in a report and map to work toward an approved listing of properties eligible for foreclosure. Once approved, the city's paralegal will begin the foreclosure pre-planning phase to conduct more detailed research that may help prioritize the eligible listing. The final step will be to engage a real estate attorney to initiate the foreclosure process. And the process is estimated to take 3+ months per property, and that just depends on the volume and the complexity of the individual property being foreclosed. Multiple properties may be in the process simultaneously. Costs are estimated to be $1,500 in legal fees per property. There may be some additional costs for settlement of county and city taxes and costs for maintenance once we acquire the property. There may also be demolition costs depending on the deteriorated condition of the property. Some of these costs can be better estimated once the paralegal conducts more research. Next is Kelly Cook.
Good afternoon. Recommendation number 10 is to implement a receivership program to deal with the large number of dilapidated, deteriorated, or vacant houses within the city. The receivership program allows for a municipality to initiate a civil action under which it may petition the court for the appointment of a receiver who will retain the ability to take ownership of the properties that are vacant and non-compliant with the housing code standards. As you're aware, Greensboro right now is the pilot city in the state for this program. I will be meeting with the Greensboro Neighborhood Improvement staff over the course of the next couple of weeks, and a final recommendation will be forthcoming. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Joseph Bocook, Planning Administrator here with the Development Services Department. Recommendation number 11 is to revise the minimum parking requirements for residential and mixed-use developments. We are exploring revising these requirements for both residential and commercial development. Over time, you look around, I think it's evident that our requirements at present are excessive. You see a lot of vacant parking lots. So we're prepared to do interdepartmental analysis with both planning and transportation divisions of our Public Works Department to prepare an amendment to the Land Development Code that would allow for alternative parking plans, shared parking, and deferred construction of parking. And that would be a process both through the Planning Board, and recommendation would come to you all for final approval. The next item is a new recommendation not included in the original housing document, and that's to revise and add to the existing definitions for dwellings currently found in the Land Development Code. At present, the definitions are narrow and don't fully capture the different types of residential development that are both present in the city and possible for Rocky Mount. So we would add definitions for cottage developments, live-work dwelling units, single-family attached dwellings, single-family detached, and then also 2 to 4 family dwellings and upper-story dwellings. They also look to amend the zoning requirement to allow for residential housing in commercial districts. We would do that through amendment within the Land Development Code, allowing for housing in a wider range of commercial districts. In addition to the residential districts where dwellings are permitted currently, we do allow them in the Central Business District and the O&I zoning district, but there's an opportunity to expand on that and introduce residential development in the other commercial zoning districts here in the city. with specific conditions. Thanks.
Good evening. During the planning retreat, specifically our downtown discussion, we talked about downtown residential as a key component and a leading strategy in downtown revitalization. So to promote downtown living and increase residential capacity, and to assist with the increased cost of residential development, we are prepared to put forward the residential production grant. And the goals of that grant is to promote renovation and reuse of upper floors in existing historic buildings for residential use, to encourage new residential construction on suitable vacant lots, also to increase downtown living in order to expand the market base for restaurants, retail establishments, and attract new businesses to downtown, increase property values in the tax base, increase utilities revenue, increase sales tax. So specifically, the residential production grant, it is the grant puts forward $7,500 per residential unit created or substantially upgraded with a maximum grant of $150,000. The grant cannot exceed 20% of the overall development costs, and because we will continue to layer incentives, the total combined downtown incentives can exceed more than 35% of the overall development costs. And qualifications for the grant, the property must be located within the downtown core. New construction or building rehab projects will be eligible, and eligible projects will include residential as a single use or as part of mixed use development. Thank you.
I want to, close by making two additional recommendations to council regarding the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. First, I believe we need to commission a study in order to revise and update the neighborhood plans conducted by the city in 2007 and 2014. I think that's important because if we move forward with a housing bond, of course, you would want the most up-to-date information about the conditions of houses in our community. So the 2014, which is the most recent study, that information is really based on the 2010 census data track. So you can see that it is a bit outdated. Also, it's also important to note that most likely changes have occurred in some of the targeted neighborhoods, some for the better, and maybe some, unfortunately, for the worse. So that is why I would recommend that we have that plan updated. This revised study, I think, should focus on targeted neighborhoods as identified in the prior studies. The difference between the 2007 study that was done, the staff actually targeted several neighborhoods to study. In 2014, that study actually reviewed 82 different neighborhoods within the city. Needless to say, there were neighborhoods that were identified for attention, significant attention, and those neighborhoods include Holly Street, Happy Hill, Southeast Rocky Mount, Little Raleigh, South Rocky Mount, Around the Y, Hillsdale, and Villa Place. So my recommendation, again, would be to have a firm come in and to evaluate those specific neighborhoods because they're both referenced in both studies. To try to initiate an assessment of some 82 plus neighborhoods for our purpose right now, would be a little bit unwieldy. So that's why I'm suggesting or recommending to council that we move forward with engaging a consultant to come in and evaluate those specific neighborhoods. Second, as with any plan of this magnitude, funding to ensure effective implementation is essential. Thankfully, the city is soon to be the recipient of approximately $11.5 million from the American Rescue Plan. We have heard previously that number would be somewhere in the range of $13.7 million. However, we received just today the final allocation that will be coming to us, and that is some $2 million short, unfortunately. So I do plan to recommend that we allocate $3 million of these funds towards the implementation of our affordable housing strategic plan. Excuse me. And I think it's important to do that because our needs are very real and they're very great. And as you can tell from the finance director's presentation on the housing bond, that is going to take a rather lengthy process. And I would suggest to the council, we've waited far too long now to put significant funding towards improving the housing stock of the city. I think the city councils in the past and current certainly should be commended for working with the funds that you had available. But now that we do have these funds coming to us, it would be my recommendation that we set aside $3 million for the use of these funds for housing production. And of course, we're still waiting the guidance from the U.S. Treasury. However, we feel assured that those funds will qualify for what we intend to do here. Finally, Dr. Jim Johnson will be here in June at the Committee of the Whole meeting to make his presentation that he would have made at the retreat. Unfortunately, even today, he's wrapping up his responsibilities at UNC with his graduate class, and this would have been a conflict. Otherwise, we would have had him to also make the presentation on his recommendation for establishing Rocky Mount's CLT. So this concludes our presentations. I want to thank the staff again for their time and their contributions. And we do look forward to any questions that you might have going forward.
Question? Am I next? Of the 11 whatever million that we are to receive, over what time period will it be dispersed to us?
Our understanding is that, well, the first time we heard about this was that the Treasury would do this in 2 different draws. I think that's probably still the case. So we were anticipating receiving at least half of it within the next couple of days or so, week or so.
Follow-up question. Once we receive that money, we don't want it just sitting around, right? But we don't want it to fly off in the breeze. So when will we have plans ready to put that money to work to accomplish what we want to accomplish?
Yes, ma'am. Great question. So once we understand exactly what direction the council wants to go, in the presentation, we gave you some idea of what we thought the staff costs would be. I would suggest that we do reserve at least $1 million of that for the CLT. So it just depends really on how fast the council collaborates and gives us direction about what particular direction you want to go in. But we would not want to have the funds sitting around. I think acquisition of property has been mentioned, also foreclosing on properties that the city currently has liens on and putting that back out on the street, if you will, for development. So we would get started rather quickly.
Thank you, Ms. Manager, and thank you to all the staff who presented a robust and transformative plan. Very exciting to hear. And there's a two-edged sword in everything. With the $3 million that you're anticipating or recommending allocating from the American Rescue Plan, is that the addition of all the dollars that you have presented in this plan here? Is that what that is? Or do you have a different?
Yeah, it could be inclusive of that. We would want to use these funds to really not only just jumpstart, but maybe fund some of the projects.
Okay.
I think of the 3 million, the 1 million, I definitely would set aside for the Community Land Trust, because that does involve acquisition. The others, we may be able to handle within our existing budget. However, that, again, that just depends on the direction we want to go in.
And so I would thank you, and I would ask if you have a vision yourself. If you say $3 million, it would be great for you to line item that for us, so that that might give us a starting point to evaluate. And then the other thing, I'm assuming we're going to have an opportunity to drill down in each of these strategies. And I don't know if today is the day we want to do all of that, but each of the strategies, I think, merits some additional discussion so that we can understand the subtleties of it. I'm also a little concerned about the easiest thing to move forward on is foreclosures, and that's also the most dangerous thing to move on without having a plan about what we foreclose on, not just why, but what you do with it. I'm concerned about there's no lack of people who will line up willing to purchase properties at little or no amount of money. But if we don't have plans for keeping people accountable to build out the city in the way that we have, we could still see that being a heat up for gentrification and negative equity for the city of Rocky Mount. So I am hesitant about a wholesale rubber stamp and saying, let's go forward without a timeline and understanding what some of the process issues are in operationalizing what you've given us today. It's a great plan. I like it. I would also, though, however, like to see some scale as to how you want to implement it, what staffing is required now, what is needed to be implemented, and then you reference in some places fundraising, I'm assuming, for other pots of money to incent what we're already doing. So I'm assuming you got people working on all these things. You want to come back in stages and phases.
Right, and exactly, and even with the housing for the downtown, for example, that will be a part of the upcoming budget discussion. So there's some things that are really underway. The main one for this afternoon is the analysis, really, and some indication of feedback from the council that these are targeted neighborhoods that you want us to really focus on, instead of a very broad brush throughout the entire city. There may be other neighborhoods that I did not mention that you would also like to include in that analysis, because with that analysis, it will tell us exactly how bad or how good, really, the conditions are of the properties within those areas. So that would be the absolute first step, is getting that done. Simultaneously, though, we can also give consideration for some of the other strategies. For example, the zoning strategies, I would imagine, can go forward. If the council is in agreement, we can put that through the planning board process for discussion and bring those recommendations back. I think it's just important to not overstudy this, but to start taking steps in directions so that the community overall understands that this is council's first priority, and that we're moving in a direction to bring about affordable, decent, quality housing in our city.
Thank you, Councilman Blackwell. Dawson.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And this is a lot to digest in a short period of time, although we did have the retreat, and I understand that. When we get to the expertise, we're talking about hiring in here, which I do think we need the expertise surrounding this and added to what we currently have. Beyond, I forget which section that was in, we're talking about hiring a department, or would it be adding to a department or adding a department?
Well, these are staff recommendations, and I
Understand.
have not fully vetted with the staff. I'm pretty cautious about hiring additional staff.
Right.
In areas. I have to have a better understanding of that. So I think the point, though, is that resources are going to be needed,
Sure.
To implement any of those.
And I do imagine and think that resources are needed if you're going to take on such a large project. And there's no secret that I'm big on accountability, and I want to make sure that that's included in all aspects of anything that we move forward in doing. And then I guess we're going to hear more about the Community Land Trust and how the nonprofit would be structured. I'm greatly concerned and interested in learning more about that. And then I think just for the public that's hearing and the press that's listening to this meeting, make it clear the general obligation bond that was mentioned, and it was mentioned earlier, would be a bond referendum put on the ballot that the voters get to vote on, and it would not be passed by this city council as what we deem necessary to do. So it's a voter-approved bond. Is that correct?
That is correct. You would vote to put it out there for a vote of the public, though. Yes, sir.
And then I'm curious to learn more about what Mr. Bocook was talking about with the parking, and I want to learn more about that, especially as it applies to more. There's a lot of stringent things that are applicable now if you're going to go do a development. So I'm certainly concerned and want to learn more about that, such as the water runoff and retention ponds, because that adds an extreme amount of money, not only to the targeted areas that we're looking for, but to any development in the city of Rocky Mount. And that's, been a concern of a lot of people I know who do development, not just here in Rocky Mount, but all over. So I certainly have a interest in learning more about that. I would like to see, this is great that we have this page by page, but if we had something that had everything with and possibly Councilman Blackwell was getting towards some more clarity on some stuff, which I think is what I'm getting around to, but to have everything to where we can visualize it instead of page by page, because it's difficult to understand it, a synopsis.
Sure.
If that's.
Yeah, if I can paraphrase and make sure I'm getting what both council members are asking for. What you're looking for really is a timeline of sorts of actions and when we think those things would fall into place. And if there's any costs associated with it, some sort of detailed description of it. And so we can certainly have that prepared and ready for you at the June Committee of the Whole meeting, because Dr. Johnson will be back before us again in June. So that'll be a nice segue to continue into that conversation. And certainly by that time, I'll have more information about the analysis process, because I think that's the one that is going to take a little while because it involves a lot of data gathering still, windshield surveys, et cetera, so we can certainly do that.
And then on the finance piece, Ms. Staton mentioned the debt. We would combine all the debt, I think is what she said. Mm-hmm. And I want to learn more about that to make sure I'm clear on what she's referring to. And I do have an infrastructure concern throughout the entire city, and I want to make sure that we have enough money that if things do come up, that we can address any of those infrastructure needs that are necessary to address. So I want to learn more about that debt piece as well.
Sure. And so you'll know we are already in conversations with our financial advisor about modeling the various levels of a bond that might the council may approve, to go forward with. So that work has already started. And yes, it would be an inclusive discussion, so you'll have some idea of what that debt impact would have, on the city going forward.
Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you to all staff and Madam Manager for your presentation. With the study that needs to be done, a $3 million study, will that study, because we already have studies done, will that study address a need that we already know, or will it just simply update the current study we have? And the reason I ask is because it seems as if that study will prolong some of what can be done. So I want to just see, I think what would be a great idea from council, now that we have these recommendations, if we look at and look through these, dig our teeth into them and determine, what type of plan can be put together to deal with the now, and also a holistic plan of looking at, what can't be dealt with right now currently, what can be done in the future, as council members have already stated with a timeline. But I really just wanted to know, because it seems as if this affordable housing strategic plan, the $3 million for that, implementing that plan, seems as if it may prolong the process. So I just want to kind of get some clarity behind.
Sure. So the study update that I'm speaking of actually will look at the 2014, which is the most recent assessment of housing conditions that was done. And that was done, unfortunately, even at that time, the best information that was available was the 2010 census. So we already know that it's 10 years out of date. However, certainly there have been changes in those areas. What we're suggesting, though, is taking the targeted neighborhoods from the previous study in 2007, which is still applicable today, and I don't think that's a very big surprise at all. Some of the very neighborhoods that were mentioned and targeted in 2007 also showed up some 7 years later for needing attention. So the funds that I'm speaking of is we would use funding that's set aside for housing initiatives to implement programs to address the conditions in those neighborhoods. But the study also serves another purpose. When we go out for a bond, if the council decides to move in that direction, we're going to want the most up-to-date information that we can have in order to convince the voters that we have a real problem here in Rocky Mount. The only way that we're going to address this in haste is to provide the additional funding necessary to make those improvements. And again, I think the council, certainly through allocations from CDBG, home funds, the council's housing initiatives, et cetera, have really just been a drop in the bucket. It's been something, but it hasn't been enough to really arrest the problems that we have here in housing. So that's why the study is really necessary to give us the most up-to-date information about the conditions as we know them today. I think they'll build a case for why you want to go forward and make significant improvements. And it targets resources into neighborhoods that really desperately need it. We do have people who are living in very slum-like conditions in this city. And we also have, though, an opportunity to make a strong economical impact in the downtown area, because we know when people live downtown, they do what? They shop downtown. And they, so that is a part of creating that kind of vibrancy in that area as well.
And when we start diving into the general obligation bond process, would it be helpful for us to be able to hear from other municipalities that have partnered with community organizations so we know what we can do and cannot do, you know, as far as marketing and promoting our position, if we have one, hopefully supportive unanimously. Do you have ideas in mind about what community or what city did it the right way, or are you looking for anybody who created a win and then trying to, you know, connect the dots about how to build a collaborative relationship?
Right. I think it would be instructful for us to talk to both, because I think in someone, in a municipality or community that didn't pass the bond, there are probably some lessons learned there. Statutorily, there are certain things that we can do, can spend funds on, and certainly we can't spend, you know, certain funds for marketing for the bond. So there's another piece of that too, which is consideration of whether or not you want this to be a bundled bond, meaning that other infrastructure needs, perhaps parking, parks and recreation needs, other items that the council may also want to consider to bundle with housing, so that as that process goes forward, because we have needs everywhere, quite honestly. And we know that many communities have bundled the bonds and move forward. So we'll be able to give you some historical information, some research on what has been successful and maybe not so successful in some communities in North Carolina.
Councilman Dawes. Thank you. Councilman Blackwell. Thank you, Councilman Walker.
I'm sorry, I left one question off that I had written down. The residential incentive grants mentioned about the $7,500. Is that combinable with the other grants that we currently have? Or is not that much thought been put into it yet?
Well, we look at it as being able to layer incentives. So yes, it's quite possible that someone will come forward who is also using other strategies, other incentives. So yes, there's nothing that would stop you from, if you were a developer, to stop you from using other incentives that the city offers.
One of my concerns is I believe if you're going to, it's all about investment. And each person who lives within the city of Rocky Mount invests in their own home or invest in living here. I think there needs to be skin in the game. And so I want to make sure that we're not bankrolling people to come downtown and targeted areas to develop and make money off of people within Rocky Mount by having the opportunity to have access to a lot of money, quite frankly, where other people that develop in other parts of the city would not have that opportunity to have that money. And so I think we need to see about limiting how much money people can get off a particular development.
Okay, well, I think that's certainly a policy decision for the council to make. I would also suggest to the members of council, in my overview of the incentive program, it has been very helpful. And I think it would be a stretch to say that our incentives are bankrolling the development that's occurring down there. I think it is helping, but I would suggest to you that there's no bankrolling there. Our incentives are very vibrant, and they're in place, and they are causing people to have an interest in doing design work, facade improvement work, roof replacement work, and all of those things are very necessary to improve the condition of the buildings. So while I understand what you're saying and suggesting, I do want to comment that I would not agree that we are putting enough money into these projects and bankrolling them. Additionally, we also provide to the council for your consideration a return on your investment. And so for the funds that we are providing, those properties are now coming back online, and they're paying taxes, and businesses are opening, and people are living downtown. And so those are the kinds of things that you really want to see if we're going to be able to turn this downtown around. Without the incentives, you really didn't have much going on down there. So the incentives are, I think, playing a very important role in what is occurring down there. So I hope that we'll continue with making it even broader as we learn more from the investors and developers down there in terms of what their needs are.
It's more of a statement that recently when we hear about what's good in Rocky Mount, it's always, Rocky Mount Mills, which is great. I mean, I'm glad they're here. They've done a tremendous job. But when you look at downtown, which is several blocks from the mill, people say nothing great is going on. They're looking in a different lens. And I just want this council to remember that when the former manager, Charles Penny, was here, he had his staff and to read the book From Good to Great. And then this council talked about how we wanted to, when we couldn't annex anymore out towards Red Oak and what's the other one? We had a hard time. Oak Level, that we would focus on rebuilding our city within, and that our downtown was decaying, and that we wanted to breathe life back into our downtown. And then so staff started working with City Manager Charles Penny and our current City Manager Rochelle Small-Toney in how to incentivize people to come downtown. Because when you go to any city that's vibrant, they have a vibrant downtown. They have hotels, parking decks. And so that's why we put money, far as allocated money, such as incentives, to incentivize people. And I won't say that we are bankrolling developers. Some say we don't have real developers. Whether we don't have real developers there now, I consider them developers. And what they're doing is taking the little money that they have and what the city is offering, and they're bringing this downtown, this community back to life. And that also infringes on the communities in close proximity. And you see more interest in those homes on the Arlington Street, Atlantic Avenue, villa places that were in close proximity to our downtown. So I just want to say that this staff and past staff have done a great job. We can do more, but I know we're limited, and that's why we have these hard discussions. But our focus primarily, Councilmember Daughtry, has been the last few years in downtown, and that's the reason why we have that event center that most of our citizens that could not see anything good in downtown. But now when you walk downtown recently, you see hundreds of people from all over these United States coming to Little Rocky Mount. I was just talking to a young lady who moved here from New York. I said, "How did you hear about Rocky Mount?" She said, "Oh, I just opened up the map and I saw Rocky Mount." You know, a lot of people say that, and they can see what we are trying to do. When I say we, the city official and the staff, what we're doing, and when other cities can see what we're doing. And it's sad when your own citizens cannot see the good in your own community. And I'm going to say this, I'm not preaching, but I was at a sale looking at some things, and I asked a young lady, I said, "Could you tell me 5 good things that this city has done, this council?" And in return, she said, "The only thing I can think of is Rocky Mount Mills." I said, "Well, I'm going to give you some homework. When I come back to purchase this item, if I decide to do so, give me 5 things." Went back Sunday. I got 1.5, the Mills, and the sports complex. I said, "What's the difference in the sports complex in the event center. I said, we just had hundreds of young people, volleyball, basketball, in our downtown area. Then she said, oh, y'all are paving the streets. I said, okay. When I come back next year, give me 3 more items that this council has done to mirror what Rocky Mount has done. I'm just proud to say, and just looking at the banner, let's go downtown. Is this what it says? Let's go downtown. And our motto, the center of it all, we should be excited. Even in this pandemic, we see people coming downtown. We see construction going on. You know, I could just shout on this desk today if I had a Hammond B organ. But I just want to say, in all our opposition, we got to stay strong, stay focused, and look through the naysayers. And with this housing bond, it's also going to increase what we're doing and make this city better. Because when we look at the Event Center, Imperial Center, we're talking about maybe the Judicial Center downtown. I see this thing, Jeff, before I get 65, just people just hustling, bustling downtown like it used to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Knight. Councilman Walker. Councilman Blackwell.
Yes, sir, thank you. Looking just over the recommendations and just kind of thinking aloud, I know we're gonna have some time to come back. Look, it's gonna seem to take, millions of dollars to really embark in a true transformation that we're looking to do. In these recommendations and in the planning moving forward, what type of process, or is there any process put in place now for the private sector, private developers, private investors? What type of things do we have in place, or are we looking to have in place to incentivize them even through housing, and even as we look downtown, as we're looking for what type of funding we need? What are we doing to address and approach that private market?
Yeah, so that too would be a part of a program development, if you will. Certainly we would want to put and would have to put, particularly if the city becomes owners of this, there are certain statutory ways that the city can put that out for bid so that developers can take advantage of that. I think that's one way that you as a policy-making board really does control what goes back in place. So in other words, in exchange for the city gifting or selling a piece of property to a developer, you can actually require that a certain percentage of what is built there is set aside for affordable housing based on the AMI, 60% or 80%. So there are often ways in which you as a policy board can actually get what you want, if you will, if I can say it that way, by offering the asset that you have. So in exchange for these parcels, we want you, Mr. and Mrs. Developer, to guarantee that a certain number of units that are built will be reserved for affordable housing. So there are certain conditions that the council basically can put on that. But yes, that would be a part of it. We would go through our RFP process. There's statutory ways in which the city can make those offerings, and certainly we will abide by all of that.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Councilman Knight for reorienting our attention back to what's important. And that's in the outcome of the results of operationalizing the vision. Because when we when we even started talking about the event center and then went through that process, we put as a secondary requirement or outcome evaluation that the event center business itself would turn the profit. We looked for a third-party entity who was skillful in management of a facility, because the only one that we could see was in Durham, where they had hired somebody who knew what they were doing in running events and events management. and that did evidence a return. But we thought as a primary, and all of us who were sitting on the council at this time, and it was well communicated in the public, is that the evaluation of the success of the event center was on the development of downtown and the rate of increase of property taxes and sale taxes. So I like to stay in that vein as it relates to this whole housing, affordable housing focus, is that I think it's going to be very important to our citizens to know what is the evaluation of return, because we've had a very well-funded element within this community that has focused on hype and no focus on fact. And what I would like to be able to see is a progressive evaluation of what do property taxes look like in those areas where we have targeted incentive and development. What do sales tax growth and increase look like in specifically Edgecombe County, Rocky Mount, as well as I like to see what heads and beds in the hotels. And just one correction, Councilman Knight, we don't have hundreds of people downtown. We got thousands that are coming when the event center has their events scheduled. The test is what happens when they're not in business, you know, and I think that's where we have to build, and I believe that's why you're putting the focus on housing downtown, because it creates a sustainable momentum that does not end, but it continues to grow. So I appreciate this focus, but I also feel that we've got to do a better job inventorying our success, and then being in a dedicated manner, marketing, communicating that. We cannot depend on the newspaper to do it. We cannot depend on other media outlets to do it for us. We got to do it ourselves. So hopefully somewhere in all of this effort, we did not do it on the front end, and you weren't here, and I can't hold you accountable for that. But in a previous administration, I was really concerned about the lack of money allocated to marketing. And we've paid for it because we've let other people tell lies that were not true about the benefit and the growth of what it is that we intended to do. And now people are lying. They're asking you to close your eyes and not see what you can see. Anybody driving through here can see. What we are doing is effective. I'm called on a regular basis by city council members from Raleigh, from Durham, from other communities across this state. I can show you numbers of commercial developers that are calling me. They're calling me, I know they're calling you and everybody else. You know, Rocky Mount is hot, and we're hot, and we need to know that. It's a wonderful place to be, and what we're doing is building for the future and trying to ensure that we're crafting a strategy where everyone can participate, not just people with big money, but people who have a little money, people who have a little bit more money, and people who have a lot of money, because it's going to take all of that. If we want to create a community that does not have the same challenges of big metropolis cities, we got to do something a little bit different from them. I do want to ask, how will we involve some of our other volunteer committees in this? We got the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee, you have Redevelopment Commission, as well as, you know, the other planning boards, Board of Adjustment. How do you see them involved in helping to move this plan forward and looking to where they participate in some of the subtleties of it?
Yes, certainly, I do anticipate and would expect and would actually request, if you will, their involvement in this, because it is about the total community. And so any planning efforts that we launch, I would suggest that they would indeed have involvement in it. I do also want to go back to something that you said regarding telling our own story. And this is a little off topic, but for, I think it's the latter part of this month, I will be hosting a virtual town hall meeting with panelists who have property down there, myself and Kevin Harris, so that we can share with the community, you know, the good things that are happening down there, and really receiving feedback and input. And so there'll be a series of town hall meetings, but that's the first first topic, actually, is downtown development. So, again, we anticipate this being highly visible, very much community-oriented. The various boards that are represented downtown certainly will be invited to participate and give their input, as well as people who actually own properties down there. So it'll be a very involved process. Look forward to coming back to the council, though, with a specific timeline of what is to happen for each one of those. Then that, I think, gives you even a better view and better position to give direction to us as to, where you want us to go. Because there's no point in us spending a lot of time on foreclosures or things like that, if that is not the interest of the council. But, so we look forward to hearing more from the council to give us the direction. But in the meantime, I do think, starting with the analysis work, because I anticipate that taking the longest, we've already engaged our financial advisors in terms of the city's debt stance and position, how that's impacted by various levels of bonds. So some of that background work actually has already started. And if you decide no bond, then we'll stop and we'll move into another different direction.
Thank you, Councilman Blackwell. I want to definitely thank the staff, our city manager staff. I want to say to our council and the staff that this conversation is a manifestation of the hard work and the dedication of the retreat, and that you worked hard, and now because of that, these are the fruits and benefits that our citizens are going to benefit from. I also like to say that I hope, and echo what our city council said, that we communicate this to our citizens at a way that they hear the story from us, and they can tell the story, and they can tell the benefits that they're receiving. I was downtown this weekend, and the work that is going on in Battle Park and all of the beautiful opportunities of seeing people out running, biking, and enjoying the beauty of this great city. I think that is, the Mark Parks and the connections, and Martin Luther King Park, to run it all and to enjoy it all. I think I would love to see a lot of that on our Channel 19, I believe, that to see people testimonies of what it really means to be out there in the nature, to see our cities really moving in this direction. And so there's a lot going on. It is great. This is really great, and how we communicate it and how we put it out there, and that we tell our story and nobody else will have to tell it. So thank you so much, and thank you so much, City Council. Work hard, and it shows.
Thank you. Nothing further? Okay. Thank you again to the staff and to the council for your guidance. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, our next presentation is Stop Loss, and this is by our broker, Mark III.
Good afternoon. I'm Keena Cofield-Jones, the Human Resources Director. So today we have a presentation on the Stop Loss contract, and Mark III will be making that presentation, and representing Mark III, we have Mark Browder, who will actually be making the presentation, Tracy McCarty, and also Valerie Jordan. And so we are recommending that Aetna be awarded the stop-loss contract, and Mark will go through the details of the presentation and how we got to that conclusion. Thank you.
Great, thanks for having me again. Glad to be here. The last meeting I was here, we talked about looking at alternatives to the Aetna stop-loss renewal. I'm going to go through the material that you have in front of you. So the Aetna stop-loss renewal was a competitive renewal from a premium perspective, well below what you would normally expect. The challenge within the renewal was a laser. And a laser is a terminology where you create a different pooling level for an individual that is high risk and has significant health issues. The original cost allocation for this one individual was, while everyone else was pooled at $125,000, they were at $650,000 because they have significant challenges. That was negotiated down to $325,000, but just to ensure that the city had a competitive solution in place, we wanted to make sure that the market had a chance to take a look at it. If you go to the next slide, we sent out requests for proposal. We got 3 back. Of course, we had the incumbent, which is Aetna. We got Voya and Optum also responded. Voya ended up being the most competitive solution relative to Aetna. And if you look at slide 4, the premium, which is in the green for Aetna, increased by about 9%. Optum was a very uncompetitive 76%, and Voya was up 14%. So from a premium perspective, guaranteed on what you're going to pay for this risk insurance, Aetna was the most competitive. The extra allocation for this high claimant was $200,000. I do want to make a comment on this. This is the cost expectation and cost allocation. The claims may not come to pass, but that is a way for an insurer, in this case Aetna, to protect themselves against high claims. From a net perspective and cost allocation perspective, over the current year, Aetna was up about $294,000, Optum was uncompetitive, and Voya was up about $148,000, excluding a integration fee for Voya being a third-party stop-loss carrier. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So while there is a slight advantage to Voya, it does not offset, in our opinion, the overall relationship and what Aetna brings to the table. One is, and this is very important from a budgetary standpoint, with third-party stop-loss carriers, typically you won't get a firm renewal. That is a finalized renewal until about the middle of May. That's what you normally see. With a carrier-based solution like Aetna, we'll have those firm stop-loss renewals by the 1st of March, which is very important in the budgetary process. There's also an integration issue. When you look at having an external party, there's more validation, more documentation, and more interaction that staff has to do to make sure that the external stop-loss carrier has the data it needs to adjudicate the claims. And then there's no additional fee for integration with Aetna being the stop-loss carrier, whereby there is an integration fee if Aetna does not have the stop-loss any further and it goes to Voya. So the recommendation is to remain with Aetna. They've been a good partner. They've paid their claims well. It's still a very competitive stop-loss renewal in our mind. And the extra allocation that we put in place is to protect the city from a budgetary standpoint, and it might not actually come to pass. Next slide, please. So we also had a conversation last time I was here about aggregate stop-loss insurance. And what aggregate stop-loss insurance is, while specific stop-loss insurance is on individuals, aggregate stop-loss insurance is for the entire group. So you have about 1,400 members who are covered in total, and for all of the claims of all of the individuals, if those claims exceed a certain percentage, normally it's about 25% of expected claims, that's where aggregate stop-loss comes into play. Looking historically, going all the way back to 2004, there was no reimbursement under the aggregate stop-loss coverage when you were with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and that's typical within the industry. Very rarely is there ever a reimbursement under the stop-loss contract. We had a conversation with staff in 2016 and talked about the fact that there haven't been any reimbursements, the fact that there probably won't have any reimbursements, and that the money that the city was paying was really nothing more than a profit center for the insurer at the time, which was Blue Cross. That being said, looking at the math, of course, the city had saved over $244,000. There's no real reason to implement or put aggregate stop-loss insurance back in place, because what the underwriters do at the carriers is they're going to create enough margin so that they won't have to pay a claim. And in the north of 30 years that I've been at Mark III, there's been one aggregate stop-loss hit in that entire period of time. From a pooling perspective, we also looked not only at the $125,000 pooling levy you have today, we also looked at $150,000 and $200,000, and the math just really didn't create an opportunity to change the pooling level. There was no compelling reason, no economic advantage, and therefore the current $125,000 pooling level has worked and is the right place for the city to be. So tonight what we're really looking for is approval on the Aetna contract for specific stop-loss insurance, and any questions from me?
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. Make sure on your last statement I understand correctly. At the $125,000 stop-loss that you're proposing here, you also looked at 115 and 200.
150.
Oh, excuse me, 150 and
Yes,
then
sir.
200. So I assume there was a savings. You're just saying it's not markedly better.
No, actually what we did is we looked at the last couple of years of aggregate specific stop-loss reimbursements. And what we did then is we took the premium that would be paid at the $150,000 level and at the $200,000 level. And when you do the math, you look at the decrease in premium,
right,
corresponding with a decrease in reimbursements, because
Correct.
as you move up, the city gets fewer reimbursements. The actual savings was not, there was no savings. So there was, when you look at historical data, while you're saving money on the premium by raising the pooling level because the premium's going down, the reimbursements are also going down at the same time, and the math, there was no savings at all.
Okay, so thank you.
I was ready to make a motion to approve, but do we do that in committee of the whole, or does this get added in the open session? So it's included on the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The next item is an update on our utility delinquencies and our assistance program as a result of the implementation of the COVID program to help people with their utility bills. And this will be presented by the director, Latasha Hall.
Good afternoon. My name is Latasha Hall. I'm the Director of Business and Collection Services. And today I will be giving you an update on our utility delinquencies and our utility assistance program. Slide 1, the executive order number 121, stay at home, was effective on March 30th. Due to the pandemic, the unemployment rate for Rocky Mount increased significantly from March 2020 to April 2020, which also accounts for the uptick in utility delinquencies. Increased usage is also a factor in the delinquent amounts. We have more people that are staying home, remote learning for student and work from home. As part of the executive order, moratoriums, there were no disconnection or late fees assessed effective March 19, 2020. We resumed disconnections February 2nd of this year, and late fees resumed May 1st of this year. Slide 2 is a pictorial of where our delinquency started. At the start of the executive orders and moratorium, we had a total delinquency of $1,166,368.57. And that was as of March 30th, 2020. 1 year later, March 31st, 2021, our delinquencies increased to $2,156,917.69. As of April 29th, 2021, we have reduced our delinquency to $1,713,348.46. As of May 6th, we have diligently reduced our overall delinquency to $1,550,381.96. This is a collection of $162,966.55 in 5 business days. Our highest point of delinquency, we were at $3,351,461.23 on March 8th this year. So we've significantly decreased our delinquencies over time. Slide 4. Our collection efforts have significantly improved with our centralized goal of ensuring that all collection practices are enforced and adhered to. We have increased our direct calling efforts during business hours and after business hours, taking more payments by phone, increasing traffic to our payment sites and our IVR phone payment option, ensuring customers are adhering to payment arrangements and providing financial steps towards getting out of the delinquent situation sooner rather than later. All staff have been trained on how to refer customers to our utility assistance team when they are needing assistance outside of payment arrangements. Ensuring customers understand how to apply and qualify for utility assistance programs prior to assistance referrals. We also are doing direct collections via DSOP program, which is our debt set-off programs, and garnishments. Initiating third-party collections, the implementation is in progress, and we will have our first file submission going out in June. This slide provides you the total number of customers that have been assisted for utilities. We have a total of 3,712 customers to date for this fiscal year compared to the previous year of 2,001 customers. The dollar amounts associated with this to date. With the CDBG CV funding, we have assisted a total amount dispersed of $3,500. WARM program, $24,718.29. Utility assistance program, that's funded through our general fund, $1,748.53. Department of Social Services has assisted with a total amount of $741,669.56. Faith-based organization with our fundraising campaign and assistance, we have $29,419.21 from those organizations. Private and miscellaneous donors, we have $39,997.55. And through the HOPE program, we have received $533,685.41. Total assistance received to date since December 1st is $374,738.55. December 1st, 2021, we were at a $2,772,732.22 total delinquency. Assistance amounts less than debt, we were still able to collect $1,976,000. I keep saying $76, $1,976,722.68 in payments through our internal collection methods outside of the assistance programs. Slide 6. We have gotten to a slow start of applicants applying for the federal funding via the CARES Act CDBG-CV funding, but we're reaching out to over 70 applicants once again to help them complete their application package to qualify them for assistance. We have also increased the amounts of assistance to ensure that they are compared to the HUD guidelines not to duplicate benefits. Customers eligible to get up to 6 months of assistance towards delinquent utilities. Customer assistance staff processes applications that are received electronically, by fax, phone, and in person via our drive-through. Our direct call process has also benefited our assistance staff in identifying those customers with a possible hardship to call customers directly and initiate the intake process for assistance. We have also increased our program visibility by partnering with our communications, marketing, and public relations department and developing a solicitation notice outlining program assistance levels, availability, and the requirements. We ensure that all of our customers understand how to apply for assistance, the qualifications needed, and the estimated time of response for all application decisions. Do we have any questions?
Just want to say thank you before we have any questions. Mayor?
Just clarification, so you have done an exceptional job of making those collections, and as I understand your presentation, none of those are write-offs, other than just finding assistance program either through CARES, CBDG, our operating fund, or wherever. But I heard that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. Now, we have had some write-offs to come about on this particular account, and I did also get that information for tonight as well on these accounts, on some of the accounts.
Any idea what the amounts are? Anyway, remarkable job. You need to take credit for that. Thank you for your work. But what were the write-downs?
Our write-offs for year-to-date for fiscal year 2021, we had a total amount of $562,044.99. Out of that, we were able to collect $327,253.10, leaving us with an adjusted write-off amount of $234,791.89.
And I just think it's important. I understand, but those listening, the policy is to write down, but it doesn't mean you stop collecting.
Correct.
So when you're talking about $200,000 still out there as a write-down, it's just in that account and hasn't been worked yet. Is that correct?
Correct. And what we're doing now is actively giving these customers a call. These customers fall into our 120-plus category for delinquencies. And with our new process for the third-party collections, these customers will be submitted to third party once we've exhausted all of our collection efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I just wanted to publicly thank you for addressing my constituents in our monthly Zoom and being able to bring them up to speed and answer the many questions that they have for you. But you stood in there and you hung in there like a true champ, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Just kudos. In the midst of the pandemic, I'm thankful that we had a city council who was willing to do the compassionate thing and the right thing, even though it was costly. The governor soon followed, and so we just followed him after that. But what I'm really appreciative of is after the moratorium was released, how you and your team were very compassionate. And I know people were not always so nice, but I appreciate the fact that you emphasize customer service, and we can see that customer service combined with a good pencil and pen is successful. To be able to raise millions of dollars from third-party sources and collect millions of dollars from people who are still trying to pay on their bills is phenomenal. And to only have a spread of $200,000 that are more than 120 days past due is phenomenal. Job well done. And thank you for your work and for inspiring your team. And it's got to have been a hard job.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, I know the calls that I got and some of the situations I had, but it was a whole lot less than what it has been in years past. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Blackwell. Councilman Knight.
I just wanted to thank you for a job well done, you and your staff and city manager, your team. And also, Ms. Brown, when we send emails or phone calls of customers who have fallen in a precarious situation with utilities, and your staff have been able to work them through that process, and that they were happy and pretty much satisfied. So I just want to thank you for that, and also thank the city manager and your staff for when we were criticized a lot of time for having a moratorium. And then a week after, the governor did a mandate moratorium across the state. And so it was tough, and we knew that revenue was going to be lost, but then we was able to, after the mandate was over, the moratorium, get back in the swing of things, and people satisfied their debt. So I just want to thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Knight. If anyone else, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is to share with you the recommendations from the Sunset Avenue Corridor Study. This study was conducted by our MPO, and the recommendations will be forwarded to the NCDOT for funding priority for this particular project.
Good evening. Brad Kerr, Director of Public Works. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to update you on the Sunset Avenue Corridor Study. I also have with me Mike Grotowski from Stantec, who was the lead on the study effort. So the study scope evaluated Sunset Avenue corridor from Buck Leonard to Halifax Road. The study began approximately April 2020 and included 6 virtual public meetings that engaged with approximately 70 participants across the 6 meetings. The findings of the study will be used as supporting documentation when submitting the project to NCDOT for scoring and potential inclusion in a future transportation improvement program project. The next opportunity to submit will be in FY 2023. So the guiding principles for this study, as with the previous quarterly studies on Atlantic Avenue, Church Street, Raleigh Boulevard, Grand and Grace, were to create a more complete street, look at safety for all users, bike, pedestrian, motorist, transit. Build in traffic calming into the design. That means reduction of speed through design elements such as planted medians and other visual interests that encourage motorists to unconsciously slow down. Support redevelopment and create an attractive corridor and gateway. So west of Winstead Avenue, David, is the residential transition zone. Given the pending construction of the I-95 interchange, the study recommends inclusion of gateway elements in the west portion of Winstead Avenue. This could include elements such as stamped crosswalks, mast arm signal poles at select intersections such as Winstead or Westridge Circle, as well as planted medians, which I think I mentioned already. So east of Winstead Avenue, the study recommends planted medians as well. This will control turning movements as well as beautification, traffic calming, and all those other kind of things. A wide side path on the south side to support bike and pedestrian travel. High visibility crosswalks at intersections, pedestrian level lighting, banners, and other streetscape enhancements where possible. So this slide gives you kind of an understanding of the scale of the medians in that eastern section and how it would control some of that suicide lane stuff that's going on now and increase safety. So at the Buck Leonard intersection, study recommends a roundabout size to accommodate tractor trailers. Also, addition of a possible gateway monument of some sort. So the next few slides give you some before and after renderings at some of the select intersections. So you have here Weatherstone Drive. You see now there are no pedestrian crossing enhancements at that location. The after, you have a refuse island, high visibility crosswalks, and potentially a signal to help with pedestrian crossings as well as controlling the traffic. The next intersection is Winstead Avenue. I think most folks are pretty familiar with that. Clearly not the safest place to be crossing as a pedestrian, but we do have sidewalks and lots of pedestrian activity there already. That rendering to the right for the after, same kind of thing, refuse islands, mast arm signal poles, high visibility crosswalks. So the next slide is Inglewood Drive. We do have some high visibility crosswalk at Inglewood Drive across Sunset, but clearly you see there's nothing on Inglewood Drive. So this adds high visibility crosswalks, but also you can see a rendering that includes the proposed side path on the south side. Total estimated construction cost for this project is $10.7 million. 2.3 of that goes towards the roundabout. Forest Hill to Winstead Avenue, estimated at 3.7. The Winstead western section, Winstead Avenue to Halifax, estimated at $4.7 million. For more information on the study, you can visit the project website at sunsetavstudy.com. Additionally, the MPO website on the city's website has copies of the previous corridor studies if anybody's interested in looking at those as well. So, any questions?
Thank you. Brad, who determined which projects, for lack of a better word, would be included in this?
So that was an interactive project with the public engagement process and what kind of elements that they would like to be involved in it. The consultant took a look at what was practical, professional practice. So combination of the public input, professional design judgment to bring forward these recommendations.
Okay, and all of this is focused around Sunset, is that correct?
On this corridor, yes. We have other corridor studies that we've done similar, and they have similar elements incorporated in them. Church Street, Atlantic Avenue, Grand and Grace, and Raleigh have all been similar studies previous to this. And there's similar elements in them.
What's in the back of my mind is that there had been mention of a Gold Rock Road, and let's see, Gold Rock and Grayson, a roundabout there.
Yes, that's a separate project. That's a safety study relative to those, and that's working its way through a different program than the state's Transportation Improvement Program. That's a separate pot of funding, and we're waiting for the scoring. Preliminary scoring indicated the cost benefit was pretty good because unfortunately there were some deaths along that
I'm not
corridor.
hearing you very well. Are you saying that we're still moving forward, it's dead?
No, that's moving forward through a separate process, through safety funding.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're waiting to hear back on that funding being scored and when it's allocated, but we think that has a strong chance of success in the shorter term.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Miller. Anyone else?
Brad, thank you, and I was able to sit in on several of these calls, and I'm not going to pronounce Mike's last name, but with Santec, sorry about that, Mike. But I think y'all did a great job in the engagement of the community. Brad, I'm not sure how this compares to other studies, but I think there was heavy engagement even during the COVID that we had in the conference calls. I think it was well attended. One question that I do have is going through the pictures, and I think I know the answer, but no chance at all of burying the utilities, having underground utilities along Sunset due to the cost of that.
That would typically be funded through a separate funding stream.
Okay.
So, if this project got funded through TIP and there was an interest in doing that, but it wouldn't be paid for by DOT.
But that is an expensive undertaking, correct?
It is an expensive undertaking.
Okay.
So if we would do underground utilities, what part of monies would it come from?
That's outside of my,
Various-
my realm.
But it'd be on the city.
Yeah, or utilities dime, or some other funding source, but it wouldn't be through DOT's roadway funding, part of the project. It could be part of the project, it could be coordinated with the project, but it wouldn't be funded through the project.
And my second one, it's on the city dime with this corridor study, correct? If we do all the, what, 10.7 million?
No, that would be through the TIP project. There would be
Okay.
some cost participation from the city, but the majority of the cost would be by DOT.
Now, the other corridor studies, is that the same?
Same thing.
Okay, so we just prioritize which corridor we're gonna do or do
This
simultaneously?
gets submitted into the biannual scoring process where they evaluate it into the TIP, depending on the funding allocations for the separate pots of money. They all compete based on their scoring. If you looked in the memo, there's actually, some of the projects, previous projects are actually already in the TIP. So we have some pedestrian signal project that we're working on that's actually committed for FY '22. Thomas Street pedestrian signals currently at 27, FY '27 in the tip. Atlantic Avenue is scheduled in the tip for 2029. Church Street for 2025, Raleigh for 2028, and Grand and Grace are currently being scored this round for prioritization and hopefully some inclusion in the next TIP.
I'm talking about 2029, how old I be in 20?
Yeah,
So-
you know how long it took to get Wesleyan Boulevard, right? So, it's a process, but the more money that DOT has, the more they accelerate, but that's where we sit right now.
So the selection is through DOT?
It
and-
goes through the spot prioritization process, the scoring process. So,
So we need to lean on our DOT rep.
or do whatever we can to enhance the scores for those projects and get more money to DOT, all those things.
Okay, I got you, thank you.
So that's exactly where I was going, Councilman Knight. I'd like to do a refresh. The Sunset Avenue corridor study is excellent, it's beautiful, and I support that too. And I'd like to see what some of those other things that were passed or that we adopted to do in the previous corridor studies. I'd like to see what they were, what we've done since we voted on them, how much the value of those were, and what it is that we have to do on our part as opposed to what DOT is scheduled to do. And then I just want to remind everybody, including my time that I spent on the Transportation Advisory Committee, that it is inequitable to only base transportation dollars on high traffic. That only drives future dollars to present development, and it does not account for future development that follows the vision of whatever a municipality is. And it's interesting that probably the oldest study is the last one that'll be funded. So I do have issues, which I know some of them are beyond our control. It lies in the General Assembly, and I expect no focus on equity there. But it also lies in the governor's office, and it also lies in the federal office. So I do recommend, Madam Manager, we've been talking about legislative priorities, and we've been talking about federal legislative priorities. So that is within our purview to rank and score as a city council those projects that we prioritize. So if the state is going to prioritize high traffic areas, my recommendation is that we prioritize those areas that are not so quick to be funded by NCDOT and move those up in federal projects and just make sure they're shovel ready. So I would like to also ask your department to give us for those things that we said we needed done on Grand Avenue, Grace Street, Atlantic Avenue, those corridors that are primarily intercity corridors, what it is the city needs to do. And so that we are clear, not just in what the vision is, but also what it takes to get to the vision. But it would be nice for us to be able to see something that's aligned together for what our whole vision for transportation is in our communities, both sidewalks, bike paths and lanes, and, more efficient movement of people in cars and vehicles. Anything else you can think of?
Yes, sir.
One of the things I want to point out to our city staff, when you driving down Raleigh Road, or Raleigh Street Boulevard, in front of that, used to be George Street, in front of the dollar store, before you get to the fire station, the headquarters, it's a medium of concrete right in the middle, and it's not that attractive, but I was just looking at that the other day, we could spruce that up. Also, right beside the fire station, I think the city used to maintain that where the flagpoles are in front of the old Lutheran church. I think it's Church of God of Deliverance. That's another very scenic medium that it's not going to put a lot of money into to maintaining those. So some of the things that we can do at the city level, I think we need to put more attention, because when you go down Sunset, I always see, the new trees and the mulch and all that near the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some areas in some of these other corridors that are very unattractive, that we can do some things right in-house to make them attractive. I don't know if it need to be painted or more vegetation, but I think instead of waiting 2029, there's some things we can do.
Right.
Now.
Spot things.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
we're going to take a look at that.
All right. I want to also say that our board member, DOT, Mr. Melvin Mitchell, was sworn in as the new board member. We're excited about his participation there, and thank Mr. Gus Tullis for the service that he gave. So we're excited about the opportunities we have.
Well, actually, something came up about the bike paths or bike lanes. And there's a study going on right now that I participated in, and I forgot, and it was just within the past couple of weeks, that includes different parts of the city, from both south to west to east. And I think we had, from the public, had 2 people participating in that. So it would be nice if we could, and included Eastern Avenue over there, and included going over towards the OIC. It included going over there by Avondale, going down by Winston Avenue School. So, there are some things that are going on that if we participate in, as well as the public, and help the staff promote it to our constituents, it would be helpful. I think there's a lot of things that come out through the city that people just kind of overlook because there's a lot of information coming out. So I think if we assist the city with promoting some of that, we can get some more feedback. In fact, one of the feedback that I remember hearing from 2 people that lived on Eastern Avenue was the speed on Eastern Avenue, and certainly the need to put in some studies for traffic cushioning and for enforcement, because apparently it's very unsafe. And both these people mentioned they're avid bike riders, and they even mentioned that they don't even bike in that area. They put their bikes on a car and go elsewhere to bike. So that's something that we don't need in any part of this city. So we do have opportunities, and one thing that I did like in this study that you have here is looking at sidewalks, because just today I saw a family going down Sunset Avenue in between wards 5 and 6 with kids, and just holding hands and, walking down Sunset Avenue for dear life. So we desperately need sidewalks throughout the entire city, and as well as these other corridor projects. They all have merit and should all be considered. As we all know, we serve all of Rocky Mount.
Thank you, Mr. Daughtridge, Councilman Daughtridge, City Manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Next, we have crime statistics monthly presentation, Chief Hassel.
Mayor, members of the City Council, Madam City Manager, good evening. I'm Robert Hassel, of course, the new police chief, and I'll be presenting our April 2021 crime report. Before I start with me this evening, I do have members of my executive staff, Captain Williams, Captain Staten, Lieutenant Bunt, and Captain Ballard. And they're here just in case there is a question. They're here to give me support and make sure I get the details correct for you. The first slide, here are our numbers for April for 2021, and it's broken down in two categories, violent crime and then property crime. So we're going to look at the first category of violent crime, and I'm going to give you the overall subtotal numbers. So for the month of April, we had a total of 35 violent crimes, which is compared to last year, April, which was 41. There's a decrease of 6 calls. If you look at year-to-date, as far as violent crimes, we had a total of 146 this year thus far. As compared to last year, we had 124, so that was a slight increase of 22. The second subcategory, property crime, for April, we had 101 property crimes. Last year, April, 110. Had a slight decrease of 9 incidents in the city. Overall, for property crime, we had a total of 409 year-to-date. Last year, this time, we had a total of 485, which is a significant decrease of 76 incidents. Overall, we had a total of 136 crimes this month, as compared to last year of 151, a decrease of 15. And then, of course, a significant drop for year-to-date, 555 calls for 2021, as compared to 609 for 2020, had a drop of 54. This slide illustrates 3 particular incidents or crimes: homicidal, murder, aggravated assault, and shooting into an occupied dwelling or building, or vehicle, sorry. And then there's other data here. And the first piece of information I want to discuss is the total number of victims as it relates to those aggravated assaults. We had a total of 33 victims, and that is 33 victims of actually 21 aggravated assaults for the month of April. Of those 21 cases, we have cleared 5. We have 1 of those 21 cases is inactive. 13 are still being investigated by investigators, and 2 of those incidents were gang-related. This next slide illustrates or have numbers related to those same aggravated assault cases and investigations. As I just previously mentioned, we had a total of 21 aggravated assault cases for this month, 33 victims. Now, I want to explain, it's 33 victims of those 21 cases. And we had 6 of those cases had multiple victims. There have been already 5 arrests related to those cases, and then we had a total of 7 aggravated assault cases cleared. Next slide. This slide illustrates our locations or our focus map related to shots fired calls throughout the city. Calls related to our shots fired, those were given to us by 2 different modes or 2 ways. One, the shot spotter, or citizens called the authorities through 911 reporting shots fired in the city, for a total of 101. Of those 101 cases, 30 of those cases we found shell casings. Of those 30 incidents where we found shell cases, 149 cases were found. The number of firearms seized this month was 25. Total year-to-date is 156, and 6 individuals were arrested with weapons violations. This is a list of some community involvement that the police department has done for the month of April. We've already started our softball, baseball games with the Police Athletic League, which we partnered with our Parks and Recreation Department. It began mid-April, and it will go into probably about the end of May. We're already planning for our Summer Junior Police Academy, which takes a lot of work on our staff to do that, and we're looking very forward to getting back working with our youth. And then we've already working with HR and scheduling and begin teaching the active shooter response training to all city employees, working with Mr. Law. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I would like to just make a note that in next month's presentation, there will likely be a different design on the presentation. I want to review that to make sure it's still informative for City Council, but it may be a little bit different format than the way it's presented by myself. Are there any questions?
You said with 6 arrests from weapons, was that coming from the spot shotter or just people in violation of?
Of those calls, 101 cases, I want to make sure I verify, of those 101 calls that we had, whether it was shot spotter initiating that or a citizen call initiating that call for service, 6 individuals arrested for some kind of weapons violation in the month of April.
Them from just this, okay, I got you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
It could have been either one.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at the map that shows the shots fired.
Yes, ma'am.
Either by reports or the shot spotter, the little blue blobs are location indicators for those incidents?
Yes, ma'am. And it may not necessarily be 101. This is kind of like a heat map. I like to call it a focus map. So sometimes those little blue indicators could be multiple calls at that one location. As you see the red and the yellow, that means a more concentrated location where calls were initiated.
Well, being fortunate to live in an area that doesn't have a lot of these blue blobs, obviously each one stands out and makes you wonder about the details of that particular incident. But we don't ever know that, do we? It's a citizen or a council member.
No, that is not part of the report. I will have those details with staff in the office.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, and welcome aboard, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
One of the things that I think are concerning to the citizens, and I appreciate the information, since we've been asking, city, appreciate that. Thank you for altering some of the presentations so that I'm assuming we want to get into some strategies and not just the update about what the facts were. What will we be doing, or what will you be doing in your team to change or enhance strategies for crime prevention in communities that have the highest impact of all of these statistics that you're presenting to us? I think our citizens are looking forward to engagement in a proactive manner that suppresses crime throughout every sector, but especially in those areas that have been suffering for decades with some of the same issues. And I think as we are looking at how to change the structure of those communities with affordable housing programs, with perhaps more aggressive development opportunities to keep people employed and keep them in their neighborhoods as well, that will add to it. But from a policing perspective, what will change with your leadership? Will you be bringing programmatic ideas to us? Will you be talking about initiatives that our citizens can support and participate in as well? Is that what we're going to hear from you in the months ahead?
Yes, sir. My first 30 to 90 days, I want to take the opportunity to get to know my department, get to know the fine men and women who wear the badge and serve in sworn and non-sworn roles. over the next 60 days, maybe a little more, but we're being a little aggressive with this. I'll be meeting with the key organizations, community groups, citizens throughout the city. That's already begun, starting tomorrow with the faith-based community. So through those meetings with staff, through the meetings with these different organizations and citizens of our great city, I'll be listening. I'll be making notes of things that they feel are needs of our community that relates to crime and other concerns that not necessarily may be crime. I will then talk with staff and develop some strategies and maybe some initiatives after we review what things we have been doing over the years, what has worked, and maybe needs to be enhanced, and things that haven't worked needs to be tweaked or need to be replaced with a new strategy or program. So in the very near future, I'm hoping that my staff and I will be able to present some new ideas and initiatives to help working with our citizens to reduce crime and improve everyone's quality of life.
That's great. And so one of the things I'd like to request from you is some level of, with these all, like what did Councilman call it? You call the blue dots or the blue fuzzy things or whatever. If we can put some names to neighborhoods, I'd be interested in Happy Hill and Holly Street and Crosstown, and looking at over the last 10, 12 years, what's the crime, what are persisting issues that are being dealt with in those communities, and take it away from just even the year to year, because that can change depending on how hot it gets in the summertime or, COVID, employment issues or whatever. But can we look over 10 years, over 12 years, what has changed substantively? And I know perhaps reporting might not be the same, so you have to compare apples with apples. But it would be great if our neighborhoods could actually say, for Little Raleigh, this is what has been from, empirical information and what people have lived through, their lived experiences, and this is what the data has shown. And because of that, this is what we're recommending as a strategy for this community, this neighborhood, to impact these particular data points that we'd like to see some movement in. That's what I'd like to see as a council member here and as a member of this community.
Yes, sir. I'll be working with our support services, division commander, the crime analyst, and their team, and looking at some historical data related to different neighborhoods throughout the city and what trends we may have seen over the last several years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Blackwell. Councilwoman Miller.
I know serious crimes tend to get the attention of police more than minor crimes, but it does seem to me that both the issues of speeding and littering have really increased in our city. It seems to be a growing disregard for the law and civility, and I think that is an underlying, it's almost like a deterioration of civilization, and I don't mean to be melodramatic, but are the police looking at any of those small issues when they drive through a neighborhood or through the city? Are you alarmed when you hear cars with the very loud mufflers roaring down a main drag? Or the corner of Grace and Falls Road, there's litter all around both sides of that intersection? If people cared about the community, we would not see that.
Well, as the police chief and representing the police department, all those things, whether it's drugs, whether it's violent crime, property crime, and even things as I can say is least, but littering, loud music complaints, all that is, plays into what kind of quality of life our citizens have in Rocky Mount. So we will look at any concerns that is brought to my attention. Just recently, Madam City Manager sent two concerns I'm looking into now that we're working on related to littering and some other things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miller, Councilman Walker, or okay. If not, Chief Hassel, thank you so much and welcome aboard. I know that each of us look forward to spending time with you concerning our wards and the particulars that we would like to share with you about our wards. And so as you make time to spend some time with us as individual council members, we thank you for being here.
Thank you, sirs, ma'am, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present these numbers along with my team.
Thank you. And then finally, for the agenda for tonight, we had been asked several times to present to you our plans for reopening city facilities in light of the governor's executive order. And so Assistant City Manager Daniels will present to you recommendations that have come from his team.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Mayor Pro Tem, Madam City Manager. Thank you. Seems like you all saved the best for last with my presentation. And also, I'm the last thing stopping you all from a brief intermission, so I'll be as brief as you'd like for me to be. Again, my name is Elton Daniels. I'm the Assistant City Manager here for the city. I'm here today to present the proposal for reopening the remainder of our public facilities with an effective date of June 2nd. As you are aware, the event center and our parks and recreation facilities have been operating successfully over the past several weeks. As a couple of the members have stated today, the event center has had thousands of people downtown Rocky Mount over the past few weeks. They will remain open and adhere to the most recent governor's executive order regarding such. For specific reservation capacity limits, it is recommended that one contact the event center or the Parks and Recreation Department directly. As for the city's other public-facing facilities such as City Hall, the Business Center, Business Service Center, train station, bus station, and judicial complex, staff proposes to open them at 100% capacity with office environments at 50% for meeting spaces, which falls within the governor's executive order. What this means specifically for council chambers is that department heads will return back to chambers. Up to 20 seats would be reserved for members of the public, as well as 3 seats designated for the media. Members of the public who are signed up to speak would assemble on the 3rd floor in the break room and escorted into the chambers when they are called to speak. Committee of Whole meetings will continue to be held in council chambers, and boards and commissions, staff would offer to give them the opportunity to meet virtually or to meet in person. It will be up to that specific committee. To ensure safety for all, proper signage will be placed throughout all city facilities, and regularly touch areas, including restrooms, will be disinfected frequently. Masks will still be required for everyone entering facilities unless the governor's orders change. And as you all know, this is a moving target, so as the governor's orders change, the plan will change accordingly. Are there any questions?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, Councilman Dodd.
I think we obviously have to be safe, and we have to continue to be safe. And I guess my comment would be, if we have a lot of the public show up, and I guess I'm posing this to both you and Madam Manager, if we had a lot of the public show up for a particular meeting for whatever reason, hopefully we can accommodate as much of the public as possible and not limit the public, and maybe, as the department heads are doing now, sitting in the break room, therefore we could have more public in here, because we are serving the public, and we can't, I don't think we should forget that. And I'm not suggesting that we are, but what I am suggesting is we should make every effort to, if the public's going to take the time to come here to participate in government, we should allow them to be in this room.
Again, this is a recommendation. The only thing that we would be concentrating on is not necessarily the who, but the what, as far as the max capacity. So if that needs to be altered to where the department heads stay in the rooms where they are and the public is in here, that's totally up to you all's discretion.
Well,
Suggestion.
yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think what we'll do is just play it by ear, because sometimes we don't have many members of the public. And if we don't have many members of the public, then of course we'll have the directors here to support the council and the administration and the questions that, we might have. So I think the intended purpose is to just play that by ear.
Question to you, City Manager, but typically, when staff come, their subject area is on the agenda, and you may have to refer to them to answer our questions. So I don't see 15 to 20 staff members sitting in the gallery, but I do see those subject areas of the department heads in the gallery, and just in case we have a question or the city manager have a question of the staff person. So I just want to make sure that our city manager have the support staff that she needs to answer our question and the public's questions.
And that is correct. That was the mindset, the thought process behind having the directors here, even if they were not necessarily on the agenda. Sometimes there are topics that come up that, you know, if they're in their office or if they're in the break room, it just takes time for them to come in and out. So if they were here, they'd be ready, available to answer any questions that you or the public may have.
Comment. We're just very fortunate to have so many options. I mean, even having people in here, having them outside or downstairs or in the break area, wherever, or online for the citizens.
That's correct. And the goal is to also continue to stream the services online as we're currently doing. But, you know, being that the governor's orders have changed that allow us to have indoor meetings, we wanted to make sure that we were flexible. If there are no other questions, thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I will turn it back over to you. That concludes our presentations. I think maybe you have something. Okay.
We move the proper second, all in favor, let it be known by our sign of aye.
Aye.